So hello everyone. Uh, Continuing the program here for this great conference, I would like to uh, just to say before I present, introduce the speakers for this section. Basically, my pleasure, an enormous pleasure to be hosting the 25th Fields on Wheels, long tradition in our province, in our country, and thanks to the organizer Barry and led by Barry. Um, this session, session number 2 for today, we'll have two great speakers. We are going to start with opportunities for Pea Starch with Janelle Courcelles. Janelle is Pils Canada's Senior Manager of Food Innovation and Marketing. Her role involves supporting growth in the post-ingredient processing sector through global engagement with post-flour millers and, and fractionators. In addition to providing marketing and technical support to processors, she's also responsible for identifying technical challenges in post-processing and facilitating research partnerships. Janelle received her MSc from University of Manitoba in the Department of Food and Human Nutritional Sciences, focusing on the effects of genotype and the environment on the milling and end-use quality of Canadian wheat. Prior to joining Pulse Canada, she worked in both sales and technical support of analytical equipment related to food processing. Janelle, it's a great pleasure to have you here. So the floor is yours. Looking forward to your speech.
All right. Well, I wanted to thank Fields on Wheels here for the opportunity to present today. As mentioned, I'm going to be talking about some exciting new things that we see for the future for pea starch as an ingredient, both in food as well as in industrial applications. So as we're talking about peas here, I wanted to provide a brief introduction as to where they fit in the picture in terms of crops. So peas are a pulse, which alongside some of the other crops that you see here on this slide, like dry beans, chickpeas, and lentils. And Canada grows all four of these types of pulses. So a key factor for pulses is the fact that they are high in protein content. So that's a key factor for all legumes, but what differentiates them from other legumes is the fact that they are low in fat. So that's what separates them from the others that you see here on the slide, like soybeans and peanuts, in addition to the fact that they're the dried seed format. So that's what makes them different from things like fresh peas and fresh beans. So this next slide here is presenting the global landscape for pea production. So the stats here are from 2018, where a total of 13.5 million tons were produced globally of peas. So Canada is a significant, accounts for a significant proportion of this production, almost 27% in 2018 at 3.6 million tons. In recent years, I think this number is nearing almost 4 million tons as well. So in addition to being a major producer of peas and pulses, Canada is actually the leading exporter for pulse crops, where in 2018, they accounted for almost 40% of global pulse exports. So within Canada, pea production is focused on yellow and green peas, where the yellow peas are specifically relevant when we're talking about processing these ingredients into processing and value-added processing of peas into some of these ingredients. So given Canada's access to both the raw material as well as export markets, it follows that Canada is really well positioned to be a leading supplier for pea ingredients globally. And it's obvious that the industry agrees as well, as there's been significant investments from both the industry as well as the government to support Canada as being a leading processor for these plant-based ingredients. So this slide here just shows some of the companies that are a part of the Canadian Special Crops Association that have Canadian facilities that are able to process or able to supply pulse ingredients. And I'm sure some of these names that you recognized, I know Michelle, following me, is going to be presenting from Roquette, so I'm excited to hear what she has to say. So given these increases in investments in pea processing, which is really blooming alongside some of the consumer trends that are focused around eating sustainably and plant-based, the demand for pea protein has essentially doubled since 2015, and it's projected to increase to 46,000 tons by the year 2025. So where the demand for protein is apparent and really a key driver for the growth in the Canadian processing industry in this space, I'm going to dive into why it's also important to consider starch in some of these conversations. If you take a look at the anatomy of a pea, you'll see that the majority of the components are present within the seed, within part of that cotyledon, so that inner portion of the seed. So the cotyledon is then surrounded by a seed coat, which is composed mainly of fibers. And the seed coat is most often physically removed from the seed prior to processing. And the removed seed coat itself can actually be ground and added to foods as a source of dietary fiber. So if we turn our attention back into the inner portions of the seed, a key characteristic again of peas includes the fact that they contain very low concentrations of fat distributed throughout the whole seed, as well as it's pretty rich in protein, especially when you're comparing them to some cereal crops. So the fact that they have low fat as well as low protein makes them a very great raw material source when you're talking about using these crops as a source of protein extraction from plants. For peas specifically, the protein content within the seed will generally range from about 22 to 28%. So although peas are a really good source of protein, the majority of the seed is actually composed of starch. So the starch within the seed will account from anywhere from 40 to 50% of the seed's dry weight. And essentially what this means is that for every unit of protein, there's going to be a lot more units of starch that are produced as a part of this fractionation process. And currently at the moment, pea starch specifically holds a very small amount of the market share when you're comparing it to other food sources of starch like cornstarch, wheat, or tapioca. So what this means is that as we increase the amount of investment and capacity to process pea into protein, there is a growing need to scout out the opportunities for the products that are produced alongside of protein. So this includes things like the starch as well as the fibers. And with the processing capacity in North America expected to grow to about 1 million tons of peas by the year 2023, there really is a need to start exploring opportunities for these starches so that we can ensure that the Canadian facilities are profitable and we don't see an abundance of starch that's floating around in the market underutilized. The following figures here show the size of the total starch market within the packaged food and beverage industry in North America. So you can see how it's grown over the past 5 years, as well as where it's predicted to be by the year 2024. So if you actually take a look at the volume amounts, you can see that the usage is much greater in the US than it is for Canada, about 10 times that of Canada. And I would like to note here that these tonnage values are only considering food uses of starch, and it's not representative of some of the starch that might go into industrial applications, which I'm going to touch on a bit later. So the utilization of starch can be done in 2 different forms. So it's tracked here, you can see as either a native or modified form. So a modified starch would be one that underwent either a chemical, physical, or enzymatic modification. And that modification is intended to alter the functional properties of the starch for a particular end use. So you can see here that the modified starches are accounting for anywhere up to 50% of the total starch usage within packaged food. If we take a look at the categories in which starch is being used within Canada, you can see that the majority is being incorporated into processed meats and seafood. Other food uses for starch include things like sauces, dressings, and condiments, soups, baked goods, ready meals, or dairy. These use categories for Canada are quite similar to what you would expect to see in the United States, but they may differ as you expand globally. So for an example, the category that is the rice, pasta, and noodles would be much larger in Asian countries, as starch is commonly used for the production of vermicelli noodles. It's important to remember here with these figures that this is inclusive of all types of starch from all sources, where pea might not necessarily be the best source in every instance, as it has different intrinsic functional properties that make it better suited for specific applications. So what makes pea starch different than some of these other sources of starch that you might see in the market? Well, a really key differentiator for pea specifically as an ingredient is the sustainability advantages that are associated with growing the whole seed. So this includes the ability of pulse crops to fix nitrogen, to lower the overall carbon footprint, as well as to improve the water use efficiency and soil health of the field in which it's grown. Some work by my colleagues at Pulse Canada has also demonstrated the ability of pea ingredients to decrease the overall carbon footprint of a finished food product by simply replacing a proportion of wheat flour with that of pea. So an example here would be products like bread, noodles, or breakfast cereals. A really distinguishing property for pea starch is the fact that they contain a high amount of amylose. And amylose is one of the two building blocks of starch that will contribute to how it performs functionally. So the high amylose content of pea starch helps to slow its digestion when it's consumed within the body. And this is attributed to a lower glycemic index, which is the rate at which glucose is released within the bloodstream. So after heat treatment, this high amylose content of pea starch is also able to form a complex that's known as resistant starch, which is considered to be a form of dietary fiber in foods. Again, the ability of amylose to reassociate itself is also associated with pea starches having a really good capacity to form gels, and it also confers some of the other functional benefits that I have listed here on this slide. So the starch itself can be isolated from peas, and there's typically two distinct types of processing that can be done to produce starch, and that will have an effect on the quality as well as the composition of the end product. Where dry processes will typically include a dehulling step to remove that outer seed coat, and followed by that inner portion of the seed being milled or ground into a fine powder. So this flour or powder is passed through a system that's called an air classifier, which will separate the protein particles within the flour from the starch granules based on differences in their size and density. The resulting product will be something that is rich in starch, but it still will contain some levels of proteins and fibers. So as this method is essentially concentrating a flour into two distinct products, one being rich in starch and the other one being rich in protein, you will often see the starch-rich concentrate being marketed as a low-protein flour. So the protein content of this concentrate is about 14%, and that's actually quite comparable to the protein content that you would see for bread wheat. On the other side of things, the wet processes, this flour is typically submerged in an aqueous solution that has a high or basic pH. So in that solution, the proteins themselves are soluble and the starches are not. So that actually makes them able to remove the proteins from that solution and leave the starches present that can be dried and make a starch that's really pure. So over 90% purity starch. These types of wet processes are a little bit more intensive, and they will have higher production costs associated with them for the use of water, solvents, as well as the cost of drying the ingredients to return them to that powdered form. So there are a lot of ways in which pea starch can be used as a functional ingredient within foods. Its inclusion itself aligns with a lot of the consumer trends that you're seeing, in the sense that it is a non-GMO ingredient, it's gluten-free, clean label, and plant-based. So here I've listed some of the major uses in which pea starch is currently being used in foods, and I'm going to kind of slowly go over each application one by one. So if you recall, meat alternatives was the largest use category for starches as a whole. Pea starch itself provides a really good textural agent, so it's able to improve the texture and mouthfeel if you're using it as part of the formulation for processed meat. The really good gelling ability of starches makes it able to be transformed into a casing to surround products like sausages, as well as the powdered form of the ingredient can actually be used as a batter or breading coating for products like chicken nuggets. If we take a look at baked goods, again, the starch can be used as a textural agent to help improve the softness of the final baked product. The starch can take part in a reaction that's known as the Maillard reaction, which actually contributes to that nice brown color on the crust of things like bread. And the slow digestion of starch will actually help to improve or lower the glycemic index of that end product. In the case of some of the starches that are produced using the dry methods, as they contain some protein still, they can actually be used as an egg replacer in vegan baking. If we take a look at extruded products, so this includes things like breakfast cereals, snack puffs, and some pastas produced using extrusion. The extrusion process itself actually lends to the formation of resistant starch in the final product, which will help to increase the total nutritional profile by increasing the amount of dietary fiber within these types of foods. Again, they can contribute to the texture, as well as just serve as a bulking agent that can render you able to reduce the amount of total fat or sugar within that formulation. For applications like the dairy industry, that texturalizing agents and properties that starches have can help in terms of thickening or gelling for applications like dairy alternatives, as well as it can be used as a coating over food. So in the case of things like shredded peas, that's pre-shredded, you can use pea starch in order to prevent them from clumping together and helping them to maintain that individual shred. As well as pea starch is pretty well suited to bind moisture, so that it can actually help to improve the shelf life of some of these products. Perhaps a more conventional use of starch is this application in soups, sauces, and spreads, where it can replace pectin as an ingredient and help to thicken the final product, as well as improve the storage and stability of the end product. I wanted to take a moment here to highlight a particular study. So this study was conducted at the Food Development Center in Manitoba, and it was funded by the Canadian Pulse Industry. So here they were looking at using pea flour, pea starch, as well as pea fiber in combination with wheat or as a gluten-free alternative to a source of that batter and breading application. You can see here examples were onion rings and mozzarella sticks. So the results from this study found that the pea ingredients were actually able to enhance the color of the final product, as well as the products were able to retain crispiness for longer hours when they were stored under a heat lamp. So I specifically wanted to highlight this example as the combination of all of these ingredients. So again, that was the flour, starch, and fiber from pea. By using all of them, they were actually able to improve the overall nutritional content of the product. And I like to bring this up because I think it's important to not only just focus in on protein or just focus in on starch, and really consider utilizing that whole pea so we can really take advantage of this increased interest in processing within the Canadian industry. So there are a number of different non-food applications that you can also use starch for. I would like to mention here that this is mostly going to be those isolates that are produced using wet methods. And more often than not, they're going to need to be modified so that they can functionally work well in these applications. So the starch itself can be used to create a biocomposite. So it can actually be transferred and made into these paper and packaging materials to help improve the recyclability of them, as well as starch has really good gluing properties, so it can be used to make the adhesive or binding to actually create and maintain that cardboard box. Similar to its use in food, Starch can be used as a grain-free source of energy, as well as it can help to improve the nutritional content of the food by adding that resistant starch. In the case of animal feed specifically, there's been some studies that have indicated that feeding pea starch in aquaculture settings can actually help to improve the end quality of that meat that's produced as part of the process. Since pea starches have a really good gelling ability, you can use them to form things like biofilms. So some applications of biofilms would be edible films and coatings. An instance where you might use this is to actually coat fresh fruits or vegetables. So this can help to contribute to food safety, as well as prolong the storability of some of these products. As they are pretty good at retaining or holding moisture, they can also be used pretty well for bandages in the medical setting. You can also use pea starches in a pharmaceutical industry where they can be used to actually create that capsule to hold the active ingredient within, or you can put it within the capsule and it can help serve as a disintegrant, which helps to release that active ingredient upon digestion within the body. It can be a vegetarian or vegan alternative to gelatin, as well as help in storage for some of these products by acting as a humidity controlling agent or to help prevent cracking for the tablets themselves. Finally here, the starch itself can be used as a raw material for the bioconversion of biofuels, and there have been some applications found within the mining industry as well. So with that, I kind of wanted to end on this note here that Canada is really well positioned to be a leading supplier in not only pulse ingredients, but plant-based ingredients. And not only is this because there has been a lot of investment within the Canadian industry in terms of setting up new infrastructure and expanding the ones that currently exist, but there also is a lot of knowledge that can be utilized here. So this map highlights the Crop and Ingredient Research Institutes in Western Canada in 2017. And I think it really speaks to the vast amount of knowledge that Canada has in terms of utilizing the crops that we grow. I wanted to highlight this particular resource here that's available. So this is a free database. It's the Pulse Research Database that was set up by Pulse Canada, and it's now being ran in combination with the US Dry Pea Lentil Council, as well as the American Pulse Association. So you can sign up for this database, and it essentially keeps you up to date on any completed or active research related to any pulse ingredient. So I have an example here looking at pea starch, but you can search whole pulse utilization in feed, for example. It's a really good tool for anybody who's interested in learning a little bit more about ongoing research initiatives. So with that, I'd like to thank you for your time. You can find my email address here. I think I'm passing it on to Michelle, but after her presentation, I'm happy to answer any questions that you might have.
Great presentation, fascinating how flexible, multi-purpose pea starch is, and also healthy, right? So it's a great route that we are taking here. So just to highlight, if you have questions, we are gonna do a thing a little bit more interactive at the end. I ask you to only write the word question in the chat, so that after the next presentation, we are going to open the floor, and I'll follow the order where question requests are put in the chat. And I'm going to ask you to open your microphone to ask the question yourself. So next presenter is Michelle Finley. Again, this session is it's so amazing. Michelle is from Roquette, Canada. Is a veteran communications professional and community leader living and working in Manitoba. She has been with Roquette since the early 2020 as their first communications and public affairs manager for Canada. Roquette is a global leader in plant-based ingredients and a pioneer of new vegetable proteins. In collaboration with its customers and partners, the group addresses current and future societal challenges by unlocking the potential of nature to offer the best ingredients for food, nutrition, and health markets. The group currently operates in over 100 countries, has a turnover of around 3.5 billion euros and employs 8,600 people worldwide, with an investment of more than 600 million Canadian dollars of its own funds for the construction of the portage protein plant. Roquette is the anchor tenant of Canada's growing plant protein ecosystem. The plant, the largest of its kind in the world, has recently started operations at capacity and will process 125,000 million tons of yellow peas annually. Roquette's investments adds a significant boost to Canada's agri-food value chain while helping sustainability meet the future nutritional needs of people around the world. Please help me welcome Michelle Finley. Michelle, the floor is yours.
Great, thank you so much, Bruno, for that introduction. I'm just going to share my screen here. There we go. Okay. Thank you. So first of all, I just wanted to thank the organizers of the Fields to Wheels conference for extending the invite to Roquette. This is actually the first time we've presented since our arrival in Canada to a large local Canadian-based group of stakeholders. So it's a real exciting opportunity for us. And we're always excited to share information about the plant and where Roquette is going. And we're just absolutely thrilled to be in Canada and operating. So thank you again for the invitation. So I'll tell you a little bit about Roquette to start off. I think most people in Canada know us for our the portage pea protein plant, but the company's been around for a long time. It was founded in 1933 by two brothers, and it's actually still owned by the same Roquette family. There's about 250 family members that are actively involved in the company's operations. They guide and shape the company's vision and make many of the significant strategic decisions. And so I think that makes it pretty unique in the current global economy, that this family-owned company is still very hands-on and very able to participate in the day-to-day. As Bruno said, the company's belief is that nature has everything we need. Nature can respond to the increasing global demand for food, pharmaceutical, and industrial applications, and that's really their focus, is to bring the best of nature. So Roquette is truly the global leader in the plant-based sector. We have operations in over 100 countries, and we have one commercial network. So what that means is if you're doing business with Roquette in Singapore, it's going to look a lot like doing business with Roquette in Mexico. Same goes for doing business in Canada. It's going to look the same as doing business with Roquette in Italy. We've got over 5,000 customers, 86 years of industrial and operational experience, over 8,600 employees spread around the world, and they are made up of 45 different nationalities, which brings a tremendous amount of diversity and different ways of thinking to the company. We've got 25 industrial sites. That'll turn to 26 when we update the slide to include portage. 40 patents a year is what we do on average. To date, we've got 90 patents specific to pea. Our turnover is 3.7 billion euros. Which I didn't do the conversion this morning, but that's significantly more in Canadian dollars. And 300 of our workforce are solely dedicated to research and development. So I just want to talk a little bit about COVID's impact on consumer habits when it comes to Roquette. So Roquette makes a wide variety of products. Products that are made from everything from corn to wheat to potatoes to peas to cellulose. So one of the biggest impacts that we've seen is on the market for polyols. So these are found in sugar-free mints and gum, and the market's seen a significant amount of change because of COVID. Fewer societal interactions means people need to freshen their breath. They're freshening their breath less often. And people are going to the supermarket less. So there's fewer of those impulse buys at the register. So this is a market that we're closely watching. We want to see if it bounces back. A big user of these products is Generation Z. And we want to see, they make about 60% of their purchases out of households. So we want to see if this, COVID impacts that long term. Another COVID impact on consumer demand is the beverage market. So Roquette provides liquid sugar for soft drinks and a variety of other beverages, and it's experienced significant change. So we've seen restaurants closed, entertainment events canceled, and less travel means that consumption is way down. So there's fewer of those large sporting events, fewer concerts. All of those things have impacted the markets for liquid sugar. But the demand within pharmaceutical market has exploded. So Roquette is growing rapidly within its pharmaceutical line of products. You probably use Roquette products on a pretty daily basis. If you are taking a high blood pressure pill, for instance, chances are the excipient, the part of the pill that holds the active medical ingredient inside, is probably supplied by Roquette. We also have other health and beauty products that you're probably using on a daily basis. So toothpaste has sorbitol in it, and Roquette is a major supplier for the sorbitol in toothpaste. So obviously with COVID, we're seeing just a boom in the need for medical care around the world. So it's not just excipients, but IV solutions, and then of course, advancement in the use of cyclodextrins for vaccines. So this is an area of our business that we're heavily investing in. And we're pretty proud of the work we've done during COVID. We've been able to meet all of the demands of our customers. As they've increased production, we've been able to keep pace with them and to continue providing these ingredients for medical treatments around the world. So talking about plant-based protein and what impact COVID has had on that, this one's really interesting for us. So the demand for plant-based protein has remained steady. It's remained strong actually during COVID. And this is a couple things have switched here. So consumers are now cooking at home. They're required to stay home. Restaurants are closed. They have more time to prepare meals with their families and for themselves. And this switch to home-based cooking versus restaurant dining actually has helped continue the growth of plant-based protein. We are interested in seeing if this continues once the markets open up, once our economies open up and restaurants come back online. We think that an added benefit to this will be that people have tried new things at home, things they might not have otherwise tried had it not been for COVID and social distancing and the need to stay home more often. So we're really watching that very closely. So speaking about that plant-based protein, Janelle talked about the demand for it, and I'll just continue it on with what she was saying. So by 2054, it's expected that 1/3 of all proteins supplied in the world will be plant-based, and pea is the top growing protein within that plant-based category. Now, one thing I get asked pretty often is, does this mean Roquette is championing a vegetarian diet or a vegan diet? And the answer to that is no. We work with our customers to meet consumer demand, and the consumer demand is driving this trend. Roquette is a big supplier of animal nutrition and livestock nutrition around the world. So our goal is just to continue helping our customers get their products to market faster to meet these consumer trends. So we're seeing obviously trends in the way people are changing, in the way people are eating. They're adding more variety to their diets. We have this new segment of consumers, the flexitarians, that have variety in their diet. Sometimes they're eating meat, sometimes they're eating vegetarian or vegan, and those are the flexitarians. And our goal is simply to work with our customers to get their products to market as fast as possible. And that is where we stand on meat versus plant-based protein, not advocating either way. So Roquette has really been on an investing pattern for a long time now in specific to pea protein. So we've been in the pea protein business for more than a decade now, but in the past 5 years, we've accelerated how we're working within that sector. So using its own financial resources, the company has invested more than €500 million. So that works out to about $780 million Canadian in protein over the past 5 years. So that includes the 600 million Canadian for the construction of the Portage pea protein plant. And it also includes investments in the original plant for the original facility that produced pea protein for Roquette in Vixeran, France. And then also we've purchased an extrusion plant in the Netherlands, in Horst. And then obviously you can see on the right-hand side there, Portage La Prairie and the new Portage pea protein plant. What's missing from this slide though is an additional investment we made in an Israeli seed breeding company that specializes in developing high protein peas. So another big question I get asked all the time is why Manitoba? It comes up in nearly every conversation when we're touring people here on site, or I'm talking about Roquette out in the community. People really want to know why this global company invested so much of their own funds in setting up the world's biggest pea protein plant in Manitoba. And I think this goes back to a little bit of Manitoba's, you know, they have a little bit of a self-deprecating opinion of themselves, but really Manitoba is perfectly positioned to be the center of this plant-based protein industry. And Manitoba specifically has a lot of things going for it. So when Roquette was coming to Manitoba, there were 4 main reasons that they decided to settle in Manitoba. And the first one was access to skilled labor. So we currently have about 100 people on staff. At capacity, we'll have about 120 people. And we've been able to pull most of our workforce from within an hour of the plant. So we have about 50% of our staff live right in Portage. And the other 50% is divided between Brandon and Winnipeg. And it's this pool of skilled labor that was very attractive to Roquette. So we've had no trouble recruiting some of those harder to find skilled trades, such as industrial electricians, millwrights, power engineers. Those trades can be difficult to recruit, but we've had no issues with that. It's in fact, the plant itself is a draw for skilled trades. They're very excited to work on a state-of-the-art, brand new facility like this. So we had just the pick of the crop as for picking those skilled trades. And we've assembled a really great team. And they're working right alongside the construction workers as the plant is commissioned. The second reason that Roquette came to Manitoba was sustainable energy from Manitoba Hydro. Roquette has a deep commitment to sustainability. Many of our customers have a deep commitment to sustainability, and so do consumers. So they want to know that the food they're eating has been produced in the most environmentally sensitive way possible. And Manitoba is able to provide that clean energy. The plant has been built using as much electric powered equipment as possible, as feasible. And every energy efficiency has been built into it. And having that access to the clean energy was a huge selling feature. Saskatchewan was also considered, but really the defining difference between the two was the hydroelectric power from Manitoba Hydro. Manitoba is also perfectly located in the center of North America. So we have this wonderful connectivity for various types of transportation. The biggest growing market for plant-based protein is in North America. Our customers and our future customers are here. So being able to reach them affordably was certainly a big part of it. The plant is located just right on the Trans-Canada Highway. We're right behind Simplot. And so we have good access to trucking routes just up the road. Of course, in Winnipeg, we've got access to rail and air transport if needed. And that was very attractive to the organization in looking at Manitoba. And then, of course, the final reason was the capacity of growers in Saskatchewan and Manitoba to supply the amount of yellow peas we need. So at capacity, the plant is going to process 125,000 metric tons per year. It's a large amount of peas. And as Janelle had mentioned, Canada is the top producer of peas. So Canada as a whole was obviously the destination. But having the plant located in Manitoba and close to Saskatchewan allows us to bring the peas in using less fuel, And it puts us right close to the growers. We have a very dedicated traceability program. And so we like to be close to our growers. It's something Roquette is committed to. And we work very closely with our growers throughout the season. So how big is the plant? The plant is really big. It's the world's biggest. There's about 20,000 square meters of built building. If you want to do a whole tour of the plant, you're definitely going to get your steps in for the day. There's 60 kilometers of piping installed throughout the plant. There's 10,000 cubic meters of concrete were used in the construction of the plant, 3,000 metric tons of steel. There's 2,000 piles holding the place up. 10,000 truckloads of gravel were used to prepare the site. And the construction site is about 27 hectares. So that works out to about 67 acres. Our total property here, though, is 200 acres. So we've got some room to grow. And we love showing the plant off. So please connect with me after if you're ever interested in having a tour of the plant. We'll be taking folks out starting in January. Hopefully once the COVID restrictions lift, we'll be in a better position to start showcasing the plant. So going back a little bit to our growers, this is something, this is a bit of a milestone that just happened for us and we're pretty proud of it. So we received our first load of peas on November 18th and they came from a local grower, Gord. He farms west of Portage. And we were excited to welcome him and his peas to the building. And we presented him with a Roquette #1 jersey as a keepsake. And we're excited to have a really close relationship, as I was talking about, with our growers. And we feel that we've assembled a really strong agronomy and raw materials team that's going to be available to support growers. So we've got Glenn Last, he's a grain buyer for us. Bruce Brawley is our senior agronomist. Anastasia Kubinik is our other agronomist, and Jennifer Tayru is our third agronomist. So we think we've put together what might be the best agronomy team in the area, and they're super eager to get out and work with farmers right on the property, troubleshooting, providing advice. A lot of growers are making the decision to get into peas, so they need some extra support starting out. And we also have recently launched contracts for organic peas, which is new for us. So we are looking to process about 5,000 metric tons of organic peas next year. And so we'll be working really closely to recruit those growers. We had some questions about whether or not we were going to find those peas, those organic peas in Saskatchewan and Manitoba, and we're happy to report it's not looking like it's going to be an issue. We've had lots of contact from organic growers eager to work with us. And like I mentioned before, the capacity is 125,000 metric tons of yellow peas. We do have 4 days worth of storage of peas on site. We have 4 beautiful 650 metric ton silos that are located here on site. The amount of peas that we store on site was strategic. We wanted to have 4 days of full operating capacity on site to accommodate those odd times when the Trans-Canada shuts down for weather conditions. So this will allow us to keep the plant going no matter what the weather is. So it's a big challenge to build the world's biggest pea protein plant in a foreign country. It's the company's first greenfield project. But really what's made it extraordinarily challenging is COVID. When COVID started, the company is solely dedicated to its people. People are at the heart of everything it does. And that's just not a slogan for them. They actually walk the talk. And safety is at the top of that pyramid. So when COVID began to emerge, the company quickly established with its team, with its employees, with its contractors, that they were going to make this, safety was going to be a priority. The health and well-being of its employees and its contractors and the communities that they work in was going to be the priority. It was going to be health and safety over profit. Every decision would be made like that. The company also committed to that none of its employees would lose their jobs over COVID, and they would spare no expense in protecting us from COVID. So what's really interesting is we do have operations in Wuhan, China, which was the epicenter and the start of the COVID outbreak. And when we began shutting down those facilities in Wuhan, it actually provided us with an opportunity and a head start on planning safety measures for our teams across the globe. So some of those early best practices that came out of the Wuhan shutdown translated, we adopted some here in Canada as well. So the site is, like I said, really big. It's the biggest pea protein plant in the world. And we have a lot of people here every day. We have about 1,000 construction workers here every day, plus our 100 Roquette staff, although we have sent as many people home as possible to work. There are some roles here, though, that just cannot be done at home. Like our lab techs are setting up our lab and establishing our quality processes. That's stuff that just can't be done from home. It's like a little town here. We have about 100 construction trailers on site. It's busy. So we have 2 shifts going. We have a day shift and a night shift. And that was a result of COVID. We needed to dilute the population of workers on site. So we ended up adding a night shift to help do that. Some really interesting things that we've done proactively to help prevent COVID on site are early on, at the very end of March, we were one of the first companies in Manitoba to adopt a 100% use of masks, and that applied to everyone on the site. So that was our construction workers, our employees, and any vendors coming on site. 100% mask use, no exceptions whatsoever. And in order to help support that and to make sure people were wearing masks properly, we purchased 1 million masks right off the hop. And we provide those free of charge to our contractors, our vendors, and our employees here on site. They can have as many as they want all day long. The intent is to make them as comfortable as possible and to encourage proper use. And then in September, we also added another layer, and we opened our own asymptomatic testing clinic here on site in partnership with DynaCare. And the purpose of this site was to ensure that any workers that we have a good team of rotational workers. So about 70% of the construction workers on site are from Manitoba, but the rest are coming from across Canada, including Ontario and Quebec. And so while those provinces were experiencing really high numbers during their second wave, we decided that we would put in place asymptomatic testing of anyone crossing the Manitoba border to come and work on site. The testing clinic has been well embraced by all employees on site. Everyone is very cooperative, and they're very cooperative with all measures that we've put in place. We have regular quarterly meetings with the construction contractors to help them troubleshoot any issues they're having with COVID prevention on site. We have a 100% communication policy. We're 100% transparent. So if there's a positive case on site, we tell the entire site. All workers on site know in no more than 24 hours if there's a positive case on site. And that's done a lot to build trust and buy-in into our COVID prevention program. We've had no evidence of transmission on the site. We have had COVID, but these cases have been as a result of community transmission. So that no transmission of COVID on site is something we're really proud of. And it's been a big part in keeping the project as on track as possible during the pandemic. So some of those COVID impacts that we've experienced are loss of productivity. So wearing those masks all day long in +30 heat while you're building a large industrial facility is hard. Workers need to take more breaks. They need to socially distance as well. So that means they're taking staggered lunch breaks. There's just so many little things that have added up to a loss of productivity that you probably wouldn't anticipate. We wouldn't have anticipated at the start of the pandemic. We've made up time though. So the great weather we had in the summertime certainly helped. Adding that night shift helped. Just having the buy-in and support of all the workers on site has certainly helped as well. We had some pretty significant supply chain disruptions. The plant has equipment in it from around the world, from China, from Europe, from Canada. And some of our biggest supply chain issues were during the initial shutdown of Quebec's economy. We had some critical pieces of electrical equipment that were stuck in Quebec. They were literally wrapped and ready for transportation, sitting on the loading docks, and then the province shut down and we couldn't get them out. The challenge in that is that in building a plant of this size, every piece of equipment needs to go in a specific order. So if one piece is delayed, it throws the whole schedule off. We solved this with a lot of coordination between the province of Manitoba and the province of Quebec. We shipped safety supplies to the vendor to ensure their workers could ship our product in the safest possible way. And we were able to get that equipment on the road with just a couple weeks delay. There were more challenges though. So once we got it moving in Quebec, we still needed to cross Ontario, and these are oversized loads and they needed special permits. But the Department of Transportation in Ontario was shut down, so we couldn't get our permits out in that way either. So that took more conversations, more phone calls, and more interprovincial work in order to help us overcome that. We had a cluster of COVID in November. We had 4 workers on site, 4 construction workers that were carpooling from Winnipeg. One of them was positive. All 4, the other 3 people in the car caught COVID. Lots of media attention on that and damaged a bit of our public reputation here in Portage-la Prairie. So we've done a lot of work in speaking with our vendors, speaking with the community, reaching out to the elected officials in the area, keeping everyone up to date as much as possible. And we're hopeful that we'll continue with no more clusters of COVID, and that we've repaired those relationships to get us through to the end of the pandemic. And then of course, an increased project budget. 1 million masks and thermal imaging systems and asymptomatic testing clinics don't come cheap, but they have been, we have invested in them with no questions asked, because it is needed and it was the right thing to do for our people here on site. So I'm going to close off with looking forward. Now, Janelle talked about the need to find a home for pea starch, and that's true. We're going to make a lot of pea starch when the plant is producing its full capacity of protein. What's really interesting, and what I really want to stress in closing, is that Manitoba is perfectly positioned, I think, to be the Silicon Valley of plant-based protein production. Manitoba has everything. It has skilled labor, it has access to resources. We had great cooperation from local and provincial and federal governments. The community of Portage-la Prairie is able to meet our water needs and our wastewater needs. And all of these pieces are part of the puzzle. And then when you throw in the amazing growers in the area and their willingness to try new things and to jump on board with Roquette, Manitoba truly has it all. And so this is the time that we need to be focusing on working together to draw those businesses near. Roquette is committed to being the anchor tenant of the sector. We're actively looking for complementary businesses to move into the area around us. There's lots of room here. And ideally we would find manufacturers, producers that would locate near to us to use that pea starch. And to continue to build out the sector. So it's really a terrific opportunity. We're excited to be here. We're excited to share as much as we can about the plant and to welcome people who want to come and see what we're doing here. And we're excited to work with organizations like Pulse Canada and the University of Manitoba. I am going to finish with an Invest Canada video that was done earlier this year, and I'm going to let Chris, the conference tech person, help me out with this. It didn't work really well during our dry run, so I'm going to let him take it over from here.
I'm a 4th-generation farmer here in southern Manitoba. I grow mostly cereals and oilseeds, but also pulse crops, starting with soybeans a few years ago and now yellow peas, which have been a huge success on our operation. Roquette's investment means to me and other growers that Manitoba and Canada is open for business.
What attracted us to Portage is the community. We are neighbors, we're part of the community. So having a good relationship and being very well accepted by the community is very important. Locally, we have great support.
To have them invest over $500 million in your region is absolutely outstanding. There's a lot of people that are going to be seeing themselves stepping up and taking on different positions and having a better opportunity to better their standards of living. We have a very diverse culture that has moved into our region that brings forward a lot of different skill sets to help fill some voids that we may have had in the past.
I'm extremely proud to be part of Roquette. Roquette is a leader in plant protein technology. They are also a pioneer in making vegetable protein, and that makes it an exciting place to work.
This is the largest investment of this type in the province's history. An investment of that size has a lot of benefits for our community and the entire region. Better paying jobs, an increase in construction of houses and rental apartments. We're going to see some very small local businesses get larger, opportunities for the trucking industry, the warehouse industry, and for the ag producers. A big win for the entire region.
What's striking to me is the match between the culture at Roquette and our values, and the values of the people here in the prairies. It's really in their DNA to do a good job.
Roquette is far ahead of companies in terms of caring for their employee, caring about their safety, making sure that we are trained, we have the right facilities, we have the right knowledge, and we have the right equipment and technology to spare ahead and deliver quality ingredients to our customers.
They've been really helpful towards me as a first-time grower, as they've come and made recommendations and given me advice on how to be successful, because they want to see me as a producer succeed. The future for me as a producer with Roquette in the area means that I will hopefully be able to keep my family farm and put food on the table for my family for years to come.
So Michelle, thank you very much for your presentation. It was, amazing presentation, especially seeing the magnitude of an investment like this in our province, and how it impacts not only the pea producers, but the population as a whole, small businesses, and so on. Thank you very much. Really good.
Thank you. Thanks again for the invites. Really excited to talk about the plant. I could talk about it night and day. So
that's excellent. So we do have a few minutes for questions. I'm going to open up for the audience to come forward and ask questions for both Janelle and Michelle. If you do have questions, just open up your microphone and pose the question. I do have a couple of questions here, but if the audience has questions, I would certainly prioritize them. So we have a question here from I think Peter F. Peter, go ahead, please.
Good morning. My name is Peter Froelich. I'm with the University of Manitoba Richardson Center for Functional Foods. This question is potentially for Janelle in regards to any research gaps that you see in the utilization or future utilization of starch or pea starch. We have a pilot scale fractionating facility here, and we process peas and other pulses, and we do generate a lot of starch. And we're wondering if there are ways that we can sort of assist the research industry in conducting research to further utilize pea starch.
Yeah, one thing I think I might say here is there's going to be a review published hopefully in the next couple of months or so that was led by Dr. Yongfeng Ai at the University of Saskatchewan, that's assessing all of the techno-functional properties of pulse starches, including pea starch, as well as looking at some of the research in terms of the applications. I will say that on the application sides of things, like actually using the starch, there's maybe not as much research on both the food and the industrial side of things. So that's something that finding people that are willing to do this research, finding the right research partners to conduct this Pulse Canada is looking into this. I know that the Canadian pulse industry is also some of the other provincial grower groups as well. So I'm happy to connect further after this if we want to touch base maybe on some potential research collaborations that could come in moving forward.
Awesome. Thank you, Janelle. We have another question from Shona. Please go ahead.
Okay, so I have a question for Janelle. So you just mentioned two types of pea starch, the concentrated one and isolated one. I am wondering, are both of these two starch can be used to the food application as well as the non-food application you just mentioned?
Yeah, definitely both of them are and can be used in food applications. There isn't a lot of research on the industrial side of things. That's something that Pulse Canada is specifically strategically trying to look into a little bit more. And in those instances, you can, it's a little bit more difficult to use the native starch. So they need to be modified, and it's a little bit easier to modify the starches if they're pure. So the wet produced starches are more likely to be used in some of these kind of pharmaceutical or industrial applications. That being said, I think you probably still could use a concentrate. There's just not a lot of research that's been looked into kind of using these concentrates in these types of applications. And there's also not a lot of research that's comparing the direct properties of a concentrate versus the isolate. So it's a little unclear how they specifically differ. A lot of the things that kind of causes changes in their functionality might be the processing conditions, as well as there could be some influences of cultivar or growing environment. So it gets a little complex, and it's definitely an area where we would love to see just more research and knowledge being created and exploring some of these opportunities.
Excellent. Thank you, Janelle. Thanks, Shona. Barry has a question. Barry Prentice.
Thank you very much, Bruno. And my question is to Michelle. I don't know whether you can really answer this because it sort of deals with a bit of the output in the future. When the minister spoke this morning, he was talking about strengthening the roads, and I could see how that would be important for bringing peas in, certainly, but also the interchanges and the roads. Is most of the production going to be shipped out by truck, or is it going to be truck and rail and containers, or do you have any sort of feeling for what the future is in terms of the logistics of the plant?
So right now, all of the product that will be shipped out of the plant will be done by truck. Our customers it's affordable to ship through truck right now. If we end up shipping some of the products overseas to Asia, perhaps, as Janelle was saying, our pea starch is of a very high purity that we produce here. It's very useful in applications such as glass noodles or those vermicelli noodles. So we may look at rail or air in those instances in the future, but for now it's all trucking. We've partnered with Bison Transport, is our provider for hauling the peas in to the plant, and then we'll have a shipping network set up to ship the finished product out. What's also interesting is we've been very committed to using almost the entire pea in the processes set up here at the plant, and we've actually launched a new feed product in Manitoba. It's a wet feed. It's called pea cream. It's made up of fiber and solubles. And we'll be trucking that out in liquid form. And so that is a new product for the market in Manitoba. It's been used widely in Europe for a long time to feed cattle and swine. It does require some significant investment on the part of the producer. So it's best suited for very large farms, dairy farms, hog producing setups. Those would be the type of organizations that would use this product. And so we store it here on site for a short period, and it's trucked out on the same day of production to the users at the end here in Manitoba.
I think that's a really interesting point, and it's one that sometimes is not recognized, is that the more food processing you have, the more feed you have for livestock locally as well. And so this actually generates more value added, not just in plant protein, but also in animal protein, because you're able to feed more livestock as a result of the byproducts of the processing industry.
And because we're not drying the product, there's a lot of energy saved in shipping the product wet. So finding those local users here, it does have a shelf life. So we needed to find local users of the product, but the energy savings as well are significant there.
I think it's also an interesting point that, you know, they said that one company's sort of byproduct is another company's raw material. And so this idea of being able to have associated companies manufacturing products out of starch and so on is a very interesting concept. It sort of builds on itself, this agglomeration economies that are there. Does Roquette have experience with this in France or other places where it's attracted more processing because they set up a plant? Or do you
yeah, in France, the plant was always there. The plant in Vixeren, France was retrofitted. It was an older plant that they had, and it was retrofitted to produce pea protein. And the pea protein produced at Vixeren is shipped all over Europe and the world. Vixeren is currently supplying the North American market as well. We're really eager to find those users of our co-products. Ideally, we'd love to see 2 or 3 set up around us, either right over the fence, or within a short driving distance. That would be ideal for us. Like I said earlier, our starch is of extremely high quality. It's really food grade starch, and it's a great opportunity for users of that product to locate near us. We've got lots of space out here, so.
That's great. Thank you, Barry. Thank you, Michelle. I have one question from Lindsay B. It seems that her microphone is not working, but I'll pose the question for her. It's for Michelle. Does Roquette source specific varieties of peas?
Yes, I think we have 13 varieties on our list for this contract offering. If you go to growwithroquette.com, it's a page we set up for our growers locally. We do have the seed varieties listed there.
Awesome, thank you. And I also have Shwana with another question.
So I have another question for Janelle. I'm wondering, do you have any idea about the existing pea processing facility in Canada? Do they provide the concentrated pea starch or isolated pea starch?
Yeah, there's definitely, there's both. In Manitoba, I think the other ones are both wet processed ones. In Saskatchewan, there's a little bit heavier focus on the dry processed pea ingredients. So it just depends on which company that you're dealing with. But I'm happy to, if you're interested in sourcing it, we do have a list of all of the Canadian processors that offer these types of ingredients available. So if you're interested in seeing which ones are dry or wet producing companies, I'm happy to provide that information.
Thank you, Janelle. Any other questions? I do have a question. If the audience doesn't have one, I do. So I think that's a great session and great presenters, fascinating presentations. We are talking about pea specifically through pea starch and plant-based protein. And I was thinking because the system and the economy is all connected and it's a complex, set of relationships. When we advance in one demand or dimension, other factors or other dimensions are going to be impacted. We have trade-offs. We have complementarities that go with every action. So I'm thinking about this increasing demand of pea starch worldwide, and also this new plant, which is a great thing for Manitoba, and how these would change. How do you guys think it's gonna change the landscape of the agriculture sector in Manitoba, and if it's gonna change? How do you think, and how in terms of competing crops, in terms of you know, choices that farmers are gonna make in terms of producing and so on?
Janelle, did you want to start? You can start.
Sure. Yeah, I think hopefully it would be great to see increases in kind of including things like peas and perhaps other pulses into crop rotations more. Manitoba specifically probably grows a little bit more soybeans than they do peas. So perhaps seeing an increase in acreages of those types of crops planted. I think overall this kind of a really big push towards plant proteins is honestly really great for the Canadian economy. We're really well suited to be an ingredient supplier. I think just because of how big Canada is, it's perhaps transportation-wise a little bit more difficult to do the end use manufacturing here, but we have so much potential to be a leading country in terms of supplying these types of ingredients. And we also have a diversity of different types of crops that we can grow quite successfully in Canada. So it's not only about pea. There's the new Merit plant that has canola and pea offering. I know Roquette, you guys just had a new announcement there with PIC, with Prairie Fava, combining fava and pea proteins together. So I think we'll see a lot more of that and really diversifying the Canadian economy. And it's a pretty exciting space to be in, I think, right now.
Yeah, and I would echo everything that Janelle has said. Roquette has a really robust R&D process within the company. It has 300 staff dedicated to R&D and puts about 10% of its revenue back into R&D as a company. So doing that research into the uses of pea starch, it's happening, and you know, like I said, we're just really eager to make sure that we're finding homes for that pea starch in the most sustainable way possible. So ideally that would be some food production or maybe some industrial applications, setting up shop near us and providing those finished products into the North American market. That would be ideal. We're working pretty closely with the Provincial Economic Development Team, the Portage Economic Development Team, and Invest Canada to help accelerate that. We start production, we're in operations now, and so there will be a lot of starch coming very soon. So we need to work really hard to find some good homes for us in the very near future.
That's great. I love the way you guys tackle this question, because you know, like through the circular economy concept, that diversification is key to sustainability, to a sustainable growth, right? And you both tackle this question the same way. So we are. It's 11:59. If there is no other question, I'm gonna pass this to Barry. I think next session is gonna be the luncheon speaker and break period. So Barry, floor is yours. Thank you very much, Michelle, Janelle. It was great. Thank you.